The president wants to give middle and lower income people $2,000.
Well, he stressed the money would come, again, from tariffs on foreign goods, not taxpayer dollars. He says wealthy Americans would not qualify, though it's unclear who actually would.
Trump is getting desperate. The polls are sliding, his support base is cracking, and the midterms are turning into a political nightmare. So, in true Trump fashion, he's rolled out one of the most bizarre plans yet. A tariff dividend that promises every American $2,000. Sounds generous, right? But here's the truth. It's money you already paid through higher prices, and this move is about to hit the economy even harder. The reality behind it is far darker. The US is drowning in over $38 trillion of national debt, inflation is still biting, and confidence in the dollar is fading fast. Trump's cash handout isn't rescuing the country, it's lighting the fuse on a financial time bomb. The cost of this so-called relief is simple. More debt, weaker currency, and an already struggling middle class falling even further behind. And while America sinks deeper into borrowing, China is doing the exact opposite. Beijing is stockpiling gold, expanding production, and quietly positioning itself as the next financial powerhouse Washington prints money. China builds wealth. The balance of power is shifting, fast. So before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. The latest strategy from the Donald Trump administration is to rebrand tariffs as a dividend and promise $2,000 to millions of Americans. On the surface, it sounds simple. You pay tariffs, you get a payout. But once you look closely, the problems appear immediately.
President Trump doubling down on his pledge to send low and middle income Americans $2,000 dividends using tariff revenue. It's a tall promise and one that government budget experts say would require 2 years of tariffs to pay for.
Tariffs are taxes on imports. And when those taxes rise, consumers pay more for almost everything. So taking money from tariffs and returning it to the public only works if the numbers add up. And they don't. The higher prices you pay at the store don't disappear. You feel them with every grocery run, every electronics purchase, every basic necessity. Then you're told you'll get a check. It's like filling a glass that has a leak at the bottom. You never get back what you lost. And here's what this means. The $2,000 payout is not an economic fix. It's a political move. It creates the appearance of generosity while the real pain, higher costs and shrinking purchasing power, continues in the background. You may feel relief for a moment when the money arrives, but the strain on the wider economy doesn't go away. Someone still pays the tariff bill. Someone still absorbs the inflation risk. And that someone is the American consumer. So why call a tax on trade a dividend right now? Because the administration is trying to rally domestic support at a time when Trump's approval ratings are low and the economy is showing clear signs of stress. And while Americans deal with rising prices, China is quietly preparing to benefit from the fallout, a story we'll return to later. The price Americans are paying for these tariffs becomes obvious once you look at the numbers experts disagree on the exact total. But every major analysis reaches the same conclusion. Tariffs come with a bill. The Peterson Institute estimates the typical household would pay about $2,000 a year under broad tariff plans. Yale's budget lab and other analysts project even larger hits when all 2025 tariffs are included. Some estimates reach around $3,800 per household. These costs show up in higher grocery bills, pricier electronics, and more expensive everyday necessities. So when Trump promises a $2,000 payout, it doesn't go far, and it certainly doesn't last. This looks temporary, a short-term boost that could easily end after the 2026 elections. For a family budgeting every dollar, these numbers are not abstract. This financial pressure becomes even clearer when you look at food. Tariffs raise prices in two ways. They increase the cost of imported food and inputs, and thus they give domestic producers room to raise their own prices. The hardest hit items are basic staples and animal products. Soybeans, corn, wheat, pork, beef, poultry, dairy, all of them feel the impact. Retaliatory tariffs make the situation worse. When trading partners respond, U.S. exporters lose markets, farmers lose demand, and those losses feed back into domestic prices. The Congressional Research Service shows that retaliatory duties heavily target soybeans, sorghum, wheat, and corn, commodities that feed both households and livestock chains. Take beef, for example. Prices were already climbing, and tariffs add even more pressure. A proposed 50% tariff on Brazilian beef would stack on top of existing duties, potentially pushing the total burden above 70%. Meanwhile, the U.S. cattle herd is at a 70-year low, meaning limited supply and higher costs. Ground beef reached about $6.10 per pound as of June 2025. When import costs rise, packers and grocers pass those increases directly to consumers. Even the burger at your backyard barbecue costs noticeably more. Coffee tells the same story. The U.S. relies heavily on imports from Brazil, Colombia, and Vietnam. Tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% on major producers are already in play. A pound of ground coffee hit $8.41 in July 2025, up 14.5% year over year. Roasters have responded with price hikes, recipe changes, or thinner margins. For you, that means your morning cup gets more expensive with almost no alternatives because the supply chain is almost entirely offshore. So who takes the biggest hit? Lower-income families. They spend a larger share of their income on food and basic goods, so tariffs act like a hidden sales tax that hits them hardest. Wealthier households feel the strain too, but they have far more room to adapt. The takeaway for you is simple. Tariffs don't hand you free money. They shift the cost onto consumers while protecting industries and filling government coffers. And the financial pain doesn't stop here. It gets much worse. The most alarming number is this. The U.S. added about $1 trillion in debt in just 71 days. That pace is historically extraordinary, and it shows how stretched the government already is before promising any new payouts. Now add Trump's plan on top of that. If $2,000 goes to roughly 85% of Americans, the total cost lands near $600 billion. And the tariff dividend doesn't come close to covering it. Tariffs don't generate enough revenue to fund this promise, not even remotely. So the government does what it always does when the math fails. It borrows. In plain English, the check you receive isn't funded by tariffs at all. It's funded by debt you'll eventually carry. The administration wants to present this as a dividend, but in reality, it's borrowing from the future to pay the present. The Treasury has no surplus. It has rising obligations. Every new dollar borrowed turns into higher interest payments, more financial risk, and less stability. When interest costs rise, the money that could go to schools, infrastructure, or healthcare gets redirected to paying interest. The government isn't investing, it's maintaining an ever-expanding bill. For you, that means higher future tax pressure and more expensive borrowing. Mortgage rates, car loans, and even job growth get squeezed when the government crowds out private capital and pushes interest rates up so that $2,000 check may feel helpful for a moment, but the true cost stretches far beyond it. Someone pays. You, your family, or the next generation. And while America piles on record debt just to stay afloat, China is doing the opposite, shoring up real assets and strengthening its financial position, ready to benefit when the U.S. system strains under its own weight. Here's where the winners and losers become clear, and it isn't balanced. The payout sounds like relief for everyone, but the way money moves in the economy tells a different story. Lower-income households spend stimulus money immediately on groceries, rent, utilities. Wealthier households, however, channel a portion straight into assets like stocks, real estate, and bonds. That's why the rich end up richer. Walmart sees higher sales. Banks, insurers, and major corporations see bigger profits. And within a short time, the money disappears from the hands of those who needed it most. Research from Stanford University shows the pattern plainly. The poorest Americans spend nearly all they receive, while the top 1%, who own more than 30% of all U.S. wealth, hold the assets that rise in value when stimulus flows into the system. They own the factories, the stores, the supply chains. When money circulates, it cycles back to them. You might ask, doesn't consumption help the economy? Yes, but only when incomes grow sustainably. When consumption rises because prices are rising, not because people earn more, you don't get growth. You get inflation. And when wages don't keep up, real wealth shrinks for millions. Meanwhile, asset owners benefit because their holdings rise when the money supply expands. In effect, what looks like democratic relief ends up reinforcing inequality. The payout feels equal, but the outcome is skewed. The relief you get today becomes the wealth someone else gains tomorrow. For you, that means a $2,000 check might help short-term, but long-term, you pay through inflation, higher interest rates, weaker wage power, and tougher competition for basic necessities like housing. The system isn't built to level the playing field. It's built to preserve the advantage of capital. And while American households fall further behind, China is positioning itself to benefit from these imbalances. A shift that becomes even clearer in the next chapter. While the US is performing fiscal acrobatics just to stay afloat, China is quietly, and relentlessly building real structural strength. And nothing shows this shift more clearly than gold. China produced about 380 metric tons of gold in 2024, and by the third quarter of 2025, increased its official reserves to roughly 2,303.5 tons. As the world's largest gold producer and one of the fastest accumulators, Beijing is turning its vaults into a fortress, quite literally stacking gold bars while G7 nations stack debt. This isn't symbolic. Gold is a hard asset. It doesn't lose value when governments overspend, and it doesn't depend on political promises. By expanding both production and reserves, China is hedging against currency risk, reducing reliance on Western financial systems, and positioning itself for a world where the dollar's dominance weakens. Picture the contrast. In Washington, money is printed to fill budget holes. In Beijing, vaults are filling with physical metal, each bar a direct challenge to the G7's financial leverage. Every ton of gold China stores is a step away from the dollar-centric system the G7 depends on. And every new US payout funded by borrowing, not assets, pushes America deeper into vulnerability. If you were choosing where to stand at the end of this economic cycle, would you rather hold claims on borrowed dollars or tangible reserves held by a country preparing for a global reset? And here is where US weakness becomes China's opportunity, a shift that's accelerating faster than most people realize. The split between the two countries is widening. The US is pushing out more debt to stay afloat, while China is building real assets to strengthen its position. As America's debt moves from $38 trillion toward $40 trillion, one problem rises above all others: the cost of servicing that debt. Experts warn that interest payments are now growing so fast, they're starting to squeeze out essential spending. Money that could go to schools, roads, infrastructure, or healthcare is increasingly being redirected just to pay interest on past borrowing. That financial pressure builds long before the public feels it. But once it hits hard. China, meanwhile, is shifting gold and financial flows eastward. Every ton it accumulates puts more weight behind its long-term plan and chips away at the dollar's global dominance. When confidence in the dollar softens, US leverage weakens. America starts paying more to borrow, while China becomes more insulated. For you, this means the safety of the US financial system is no longer something to take for granted. The dollar will likely remain powerful in the short term. But the cracks are spreading. Inflation still lingers. Interest rates remain elevated, and asset bubbles form under the surface. And when those bubbles burst, the people holding real assets win. Those holding debt promises lose. So these payouts, $2,000 here, a tariff dividend there, aren't free policy ideas. They're a gamble that the world will keep accepting the US system. A gamble that rising debt won't matter. A gamble that you won't feel the consequences. But the long-term reality always arrives. One nation is buying time with borrowed money. The other is buying power with real assets. And in a global reset, those two strategies do not end the same way. To stay updated, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next one.